Now let's talk about the basic construct of what we are as human beings. For a long time we talked about body, mind, spirit. The idea that there was a body, mind, spirit. This is a unique perspective that has been developed in the last couple hundred years. Now, when we look at the body, we understand that there are certain physiological, biological needs. Biological needs are not just limited to the body, however. But let's talk about the actual body needs. We have hunger, thirst, clothing, shelter. This leads us to an idea of territorialness as well. The mind, then. We're not trying to say that there's a differentiation, that the mind and spirit or the body can be separated. They're all entwined here. It really is much more of a gestalt, not really a separate thing. But we can talk about these in different, separate ways. Inside the mind, we have needs for respect, love, intellectual stimulation, sex. And sex is one that appears on the body, because we have sexual needs in the body. There's also sexual needs in the mind. And the actual sex act is mostly of the mind. It really is not so much of the body. Sex really takes place as the mind. In fact, everything really kind of does. Now in the spirit, if we get on to the spirit, we're going to see that there really is an idea of spirit. The idea of the prayer, oneness, a selflessness, reverence, an idea of a power greater than one. And probably the best way to really explain this is the idea of Christmas. The feeling that universally, atheist or whatever, but the feeling of a joyous time of the year that Christmas represents. That type of a feeling that happens on that special day, whether you're Christian or whatever. You might have other holidays that you have found that special feeling at, for whatever religion you might have or share. Or you might have found these days just for having a good day. But when you find that quality of spirit is very nice and very positive, very helpful. Couldn't we have a society where that is more than just one day a year? Couldn't we have a society where we could achieve something close to that every day? Is it possible? That's what this project is all about. In order to understand that, in order to achieve that, there are many different rules, and that's what this whole project is about. But right now, let's understand that there is a body, mind, and spirit, and they have different needs. Each of these needs produces biological states that drive the need for these things and make the body go out and try to find food, to find respect, to find love, to find intellectual stimulation. Also, altered states of consciousness. There's an innate drive for the human being to want to alter his state of consciousness. To have a beer, or maybe more, different types of drugs. That can lead into an addiction quality, is that any of the things that are on the board now can be addictive. They can make it so that a person has to have it and then gets into an addictive state. However, there are drugs that are even much more addictive because they will have biological effects of addiction as well as mental effects of addiction. Smoking can be a physical addiction, but also has a mental component to it as well. So all of this comes in together for us to be able to analyze. The human brain is built so that all different types of things are happening, but at certain times, a hormonal reaction can get so intense as to fill the brain. Thereby, a type of obsession comes out, or maybe somebody can't get out of an idea. The basic idea of how to build a monkey trap, we've talked about this many times. If you haven't heard about that, we take the little coconut and put a hole in the top. Monkey comes along, puts his hand into the coconut, grabs a piece of candy. While he's got a hold of the piece of candy, he can't get his hand out of the coconut. He's trapped. What really has him trapped is a state of greed. Now, greed can be seen as a biological, because of protection of territory, trying to make sure that you have clothing, survival, and food. But actually, greed is much more of the mind. Because now all the monkey has to do is let go of the candy, let go of the greed, and he'll escape, be able to leave. He can escape. Greed holds the monkey. Down comes the hunters, and it's a wise monkey. The wise monkeys the hunters don't want to kill, but it's only a wise monkey that can let go. And that's as human beings what we also need, because we recognize anger comes. Somebody hits the back of your car, you're going to get angry. But the question is, how long does it take to let go? The two monks were walking down the field, and they're walking along. It's the rainy season, and there's this beautiful woman wearing a beautiful silk kimono, and she can't get across the road because it's too muddy. What to do? The one monk picks her up and carries her across the road, sends her down. They continue to walk. It's miles later, and the other monk says, I got to say something. He says, we're not allowed to think about beautiful women, let alone touch them. How did you do that? How could you touch that woman? And the other monk said, I set her back down miles ago. You're still carrying her? In other words, he had still been obsessed by the thought. Sometimes this obsession can be good, can be purposeful, helpful. Sometimes that obsession can be negative. The whole practice of psychology is finding ways to help people get out of their little mental traps. That is the best perspective of psychology that I have found. That's how I've tried to build my practice as a psychologist, is to recognize that when you reward a behavior, you get more of it. So to reward depression, to reward anxiety, you are so depressed. Oh my God. That's rewarding. Tell me about your anxiety. That's rewarding. Where actually we can help extinct those behaviors by ignoring them and getting into positive behaviors. That's one of the types of practice. Now let's get back to our idea here of the body and the mind and the spirit. As human beings, we are also social. It is wrong for us to think that it's just body, mind, and spirit. In fact, that was one of the big mistakes of the 60s. Everybody thought my body, my mind, my spirit. And that lended to an idea of conceit. Just me. That helped to build a kind of a problem in that culture. It was just my perspective. Go to California and everybody wants to talk about themselves. And after they've talked about themselves, then they say, well, that's enough about me. What do you think of me? That type of perspective, because just body, mind, and spirit. But we are social. Because as God found it, and as I believe, and He laid out the ideas of the Bible, to love thy neighbor as thyself. Very, very important. We are social beings. The worst thing we can do to a human being is not really deprive them of food, etc. The worst thing we do is solitary confinement. Or we deprive them of social contact. Because in social contact, we find that we need networking. There's that networking underneath the social. We need to talk. People who have networks live longer. And people who marry live longer because they have a built-in network. Meaningful others. To take away the right of marriage is a disturbing thing to take away from anybody. That is a real problem in our society. To think that we're going to take away a possibility of pursuit of happiness. And that's what marriage seems to offer us. And not only a pursuit of happiness, but also an extension of life. Through happiness and through talking. Through sharing, networking, caring. These social needs are very, very important. Because we are social animals. And we live and work. And anything that anybody has ever been proud of is always a team effort. It's always a team that gets together to do these things. Very important. The computer, the car, the house. There's very, very few things that are just done by one person. It's a team. And even though I'm making all this movie myself, etc., I want you to understand you're part of the team because you're watching it. There's a connection. There's a connection of people. And that's when we're really together and we're really alive. When we connect. Because we are social beings as well. As soon as we say this, we now take a different perspective of community. Let's add community under social. We take a look at this of the sharing and caring. We now have to have social laws to allow us to understand and to set down bits of ideas of sharing and caring. We talk about equality. We talk about freedom. Words that mean a lot. Words that inspire. Words that fill us with uplifting emotions. Happiness. Family. come out of that social network. Freedom, liberty, justice, fraternity, brotherhood. Such positive emotions. Negative things that counteract that are anger, hatred, prejudice. And the prejudice of the world is maintained through keeping an unequal economic strata. Something that we talk about over and over again in these tapes, but I wanted to at least mention it, because this might be the only tape you ever get a chance to see. It's the inequality of our education. Because up here in our mental area, we're going to see intellectual stimulation. We know that if we take away intellectual stimulation from certain rats, they don't develop as well, and they're not as healthy. Intellectual stimulation is a need. This is something we need. This is something we want. This is something we have to have. Now, when we have a society that is built on unequal education, because of economic concerns, because one school over here 5 miles away has a poorer set of houses than the other school, these children get a different education. That is what we call an apartheid, a separation, a prejudice. A true expression of prejudice. Now we have defined the problem, as we will 100 times in this concept. We're going to complete our ideas of who and what we are, because we're not just body, mind, and spirit and social. We are also environmental. We are locked into the perspective of this planet. We are children of this planet that have been born into this planet, raised in its gravitational field, its electromagnetic field, its social field, its air, because we all share air. Now, it was in the concept of the American Indian that planet Earth was part of his religion, part of his cosmology, part of his belief in all. And the reverence of Mother Earth was a deep, deep part of what he believed in. He thereby had a hard time when the Trinity came and the church came. They said Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And they had this idea of a Trinity, and they had this idea of a God and a Spirit. And they could accept that, but they said, where's Mother Earth in your religion? It didn't exist in their religion. Because it didn't exist in their religion, perhaps that's why they felt they could destroy Mother Earth. They could ravage Mother Earth. They could pillage Mother Earth. It wasn't part of their perspective. We now must recognize that as human beings, we reap what we sow. What we sow, we reap. And if we're going to pollute this planet and corrupt this planet, it's going to be a problem. We are body, mind, spirit, social, and environmental. These are the ways we must understand ourselves. We have to give back and forth of this planet, because all of biology is giving forth a flow of inside nutrition, outside excess, outside excretion. And the excretions that we have as an animal are also then the food for plants. As we exhale carbon dioxide, and plants need carbon dioxide to make oxygen. The life cycle of the entire world that allows us all to live. Not just our individual biology, not just our social community network, but our respect and honor and share to the environment. And this is what the human beings are. Because as we get back to our picture here, in the body, the Bible tells us, the body is the temple of God, and he who defiles that temple, him shall God destroy. Not to him will God slap the wrist, him will God destroy. The body is the temple. In the areas of the mind, as a man thinketh in the heart, so is he. And as you think in your heart, you are. Because it is as you think that will be the filter of all your thoughts. Two men were walking there and looked up at a beautiful bird, and one said, what an incredible bird, and had a moment of rapture and harmony and touch of the process and the beauty. And the other man said, is the bird going to shit on me? And how my father now is sick, and I've always seen that my father has lived his life in bitterness, that every day more bitter than the next. Not that the world is bitter, but in his heart that bitterness has made his world bitter. And all around us we've always tried to touch him and help him. Maybe one day we will, because we will not stop trying. Because this is As you are, as a man thinketh in his heart, he is. Well, that's absolutely true, because as you are, as you think you are, etc., will determine the world that around you. Because all of the world around you, all of your perceptions will be cast through that filter of who you are and as you think. So as a man thinketh in his heart, he is. Next, spiritual. Because now here we say, God says, have no other God before me. Honor the Lord thy God Almighty. You might want to take out the word God and put in a different word. Somebody told me that God's an inappropriate word. It's really a reverence. It's a feeling of spirit. It's that quality of spirituality. Spirituality can also be thought of as family and social, but it's beyond that. There's a reverence, a connection to the all. Recognition that there's a power of spirit. And there is a definite power of spirit that everyone touches. And they always said that there's no atheist in the foxholes. Because even then, at certain times, everybody can be touched. That's what I believe. Maybe you believe that as well. And if you don't, you will. Next, social. Love thy brother as thyself. Social. The golden rule. Do not do unto others what you do not want done unto you. A simple rule. It doesn't say do unto others what you want done to you. That's a nice rule, but I don't really like chocolate ice cream. If somebody wants to, because they like chocolate ice cream, wants to give me chocolate ice cream, I don't like chocolate ice cream. I like vanilla ice cream. Do not do unto others what you do not want done unto you. Don't hurt people. Basic ideas. Medicine was built around the idea of first don't hurt. An idea that modern medicine gave up and an idea that modern medicine must return to. First don't hurt. Don't hurt others. The golden rule. Do not do unto other people what you do not want done unto you. The basic idea. Environmental, as we reap, we will sow. Because what we plant into this world, if we're going to put into this world genetically modified foods, what will we get out? If we're going to let greed drive us. Because now let's return to our picture here. We're going to see, as we look at this body, mind, spirit, social, environmental, that territorialism extends to almost all of this because people want to protect their environment, their social network. Out of this comes a geographical nature that it is a biological event where people want to protect their country, their brethren, their, quote, brothers. It's very difficult for people to recognize that all people are the brothers because very, very few people live in the world today. Most people live in their little countries, their little houses, their communities, etc. They don't live in the world. They might travel the world, but they don't really live in it. Very, very few people actually are of the world. Most people are of their little areas. And they try to take their little areas with them and construct little things and make sure that they're always safe and secure in their own little perspective. Not really joining into another culture or really experiencing it. Kind of sitting back and observing it and laughing at it. That's what most people do. In this perspective of territorialism that grows out of this, then comes in greed. As we're talking about perception of this movie here, this little perception movie, we must understand that motivation affects your perception. And if your motivation is that you're hungry, your perception will be tuned to this. If your motivation is that you're lonely, you're going to be tuned into places where you might, observations where there might be people and you might have a chance. You might want to go to libraries, social clubs, nightclubs, for contact. If you're hungry, you're going to be looking at advertisements for food and restaurants. If something's wrong with your car and you're driving along, you're going to be looking for a mechanic. Motivation will determine your perception. And if your motivation becomes money, greed, that will affect your perception. People who have always spent a large part of their life honoring me as a wise man, but after they owe me money, all of a sudden I'm not so wise. It happens to me all the time. As soon as they owe me $1 million, then, I'm not such a good person after all. Whereas before that, I'm a wonderful person. I'm fantastic. But as soon as they owe me money, I don't know. Was he all that good? Because greed affects perception. It's an undeniable truth, something we must recognize as true. So when we saw the tobacco executives hand on the Bible, saying that tobacco had no effect on cancer, and that's what their belief, and it was not addictive, and absolutely we found out that they were lying because we knew that, part of them was probably convinced that they were telling the truth, because that's how strong money can switch perception. Money can make it switch perception. And if we look into the books of Machiavelli, we're going to see a complete, really, it might seem as a depressing look, but it is a true look. And it is something we're going to have to deal with. And that's what we're here talking about in this tape today. So now, as we get into the ideas of perception, we've established that we cannot perceive the true nature of the world. We can only perceive a certain level of it. What does it take for perception? In our science, we talked about what it took for living to be able to metabolize and to reproduce. But perception is something different. What does it take for perception? Perception seems to be a pattern recognition. Pattern recognition means some type of bonding. Talk about consciousness. To be able to perceive and have that type of consciousness. This is irrelevant of metabolism and reproduction. That's a biological event. Could it be that there are conscious beings, not biological beings, but conscious beings, let's say, in the moon, in the sun? If it's at 0 degrees Kelvin and there's absolutely no movement, if everything is boom, static, totally non-movement, and if there's no electromagnetic radiation, it would be hard to conceive of a perception ability there. But as long as there is some type of energy, could it be that organizational states will happen that could produce consciousness? The spirit world, etc. Interesting. We'll talk about that later. But what we've basically been able to show in our discussion here is that we cannot really understand the quality of the world. We have a perspective. Our senses are giving us information that is variant and not perfect. We do the best we can. We filter this through a social construct and a reflection of what's inside of us as we see things in our different, and we look at other cultures and how we see things. And something that we have bonded to in one little culture might not like something that's in another culture. Thereby we have to have prejudicial ideas of this and that. Because that's part of what we are growing up. Our ideals of all of the people around the world, when we come up with the ideals of who we are going to revere, it's always the open-minded person who is able to, more relaxed-wise, not give into those prejudicial states. Those are what we actually see as our guidelines, our goals, our role models, as it will. Is we really want more of those people. We talk about the qualities of the positive energy, the freedom, and etc. But ideas of killing and prejudice, etc., those are negative words in all cultures. But this is something we need to do more of, because right now we are in a dark ages of development. Now, if we look into the ideas of bonding, the ideas of different types of bonding, we've looked at this type of thing. We've shown different perspectives. Now let's go back to the is that a skull? Is that a woman looking in a mirror? Is that an Indian? Is that an Eskimo? Look at these things. What's the name of this person? Well, very easily, that's Jesus. So you can see these different perspectives as we have bonding. Now let's look at some clouds, simple clouds in the sky. And you recognize how certain people can look up and see, oh, I see a doggy. Cool. The other person says, no, I see two men at a table. In psychology, there's kind of a projective test we do this. We talk about the Rorschach test. Take an ink blot. Let's show an ink blot now. Somebody might say, I see a moth. Somebody else might say, I see two dancing bears. I see somebody fighting with his mother. What we're going to find is that the words that come out of what they perceive, their perception, is taken through a filter inside them. And then that filter enhances and changes their perception. Motivation affects perception. All the other factors of who and what you are affect your perception. Thereby, that's how these projective psychological tests work. Because they are based on a truism. All perception tests based and given through us. So by looking at our perceptions, we can see who the person is in more detail. And oftentimes we can find little problems of social constructs, etc. That's the skill of projective quality. Something I've been trained in. I've done thousands of house tree persons. As people draw a house, draw a tree, draw a person, and their drawings will tell me different bits about their personality. Different things that come out. But what in our society here, if we have the clouds, and what if we have a society where a social construct has been given? Synthetic drugs are good. This is a social construct developed in the 1920s. And somebody looked up in the clouds and said, you know what, I can make insulin out of petrochemicals. The development of synthetic drugs started. People started making a lot of money from this. Awful lot of money from this. Money started interfering with their perception, so then they started teaching this as if it was reality. And now at this point in time, the absolute, undeniably irrevocable truth is the synthetic drug era didn't really work. Natural medicine has the answers. It's much more complicated than just where to put that calcium. It's also into the quantum states of that calcium and whether it's organic or not. And our society has now chosen to reject the synthetic foods, the synthetic wines, synthetic cheeses. We reject these things. And our society is about to reject the synthetic medicines. Because somebody else looked up there and said, you know what, I don't see that picture. So the social picture was that the chemical company said, I see a doggy in that cloud. They looked into their perspective of the synthetic drugs and building it, and they saw a doggy. That was not hard and fast. That was their perception. They bonded to that perception very heavy. They started using this stuff, but then somebody else, a group of other people, including myself and an awful lot of other people, came up with, you know what? That's not a doggy. I see a horsey. I see natural medicine. Just another perspective. According to the rules, there really should be an equal ability, because synthetic drugs, haven't been proven. Their whole idea of the statistical analysis, we tear that apart, different parts of this movie. Don't need to do that now. You can go to that and look at it. But there was two different perceptions. And the person seeing the horsey, you see a doggy, that's fine, I see a horsey. But the person who saw the doggy said, no, you must see a doggy. You have to see a doggy. Here we got a problem. Thomas Jefferson wrote on the top of his memorial, I've sworn on the altar of God to oppose any tyranny over the minds of men. Because there are people who want to tyrannize the minds of men. They want everybody to see that doggy. They want them to see that synthetic drugs. And the real truth is, somebody else might say, you know what, I don't want those synthetic drugs. I see natural medicine. Maybe somebody sees osteopathy, acupuncture. Maybe they see something a little different. They have the ability to go out and check it and do it and develop a culture and try to do it safely within the rules. But somebody else said, no, everybody must see a doggy. The idea of equal economic education. See, the minorities of the world, especially like the black culture. I'm going to speak to the black cultures of America. The black cultures have been told, take what we give you. You have your little bit of real estate tax. And that's it. And over here we have our real estate tax. And that whole insult to the word equality perpetuates the prejudice. And the rich people have seen their little doggy. Blacks, shut up. Take what we give you. Take the education based on your own real estate. Ha! 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 Hey, fucked you hard. Now you might look up, having watched this tape, and might see it different. You might look up and say, you know what? I see a black guy hanging a white guy from a tree. Did I go too far? Maybe. Can I go far enough? Can I let you understand that anything less than equality is prejudice? If the state of California has one student getting a different amount than another, that's called prejudice. Equal economic education, anything less is just prejudice. I've given you a new idea here. Can you bond? Can you understand the word of equality versus the word of prejudice? The emotions that anger and prejudice give you. Hatred that can be taken away because we knew it. We built a society built on equality, freedom. That's what we built. But that's not how it came down. New idea. Maybe you look up and you might see that doggy. Maybe you might look up and see a different one perspective. That's the idea of what social construct have. There's another thing, because right now, throughout the entire world, 99.9% of the population sees a world, a universe of prayer, spirit, religion. What we're going to call a non-local universe. The ideas of the mind, the ideas of being able to pray for somebody, the idea of God, the idea of a power. Being able to affect things. They read the religious books, the Bible and whatever, and they see this and they believe it. And the human race has built on this. And now science has come along through Bell's theorem and a lot of other things, as we talked about in the discussion of local versus non-local universe. Because that type of science has come along and said, yes, there is a quality of spirit. There is absolute, undeniable, provable, yes, here it is. Boom. There's a non-local universe. One mind can affect another mind. These things happen. Everybody tells stories throughout the entire back door of time. 99.9% of the people look up and see a world of spirit and power. And yet that 0.1% sees a scientific, reduced side, a side where there is no spirit, no God, no religion. And we have given that tiny 1% the power of affecting our medicines, affecting our lives, affecting our whether we go to war or not. We've given these people power, and they laugh at us. They laugh at us in our ability to see God and to see religion. These scientists that we have given the control of this planet to, they laugh at us because they see a different doggy. I'm not trying to say whether it's a doggy or a horsey, whatever. But we have the ability to see this. And we should not be giving up our power to people who have no idea or perception of spirit. We should not be giving our power to these people. We should try to hold on to that power of science. So here, as we've gone through, we've looked at the ideas of bonding. And our society has tried to force everybody to try to bond to these ideas of unequal economic education. The ideas that synthetic drugs are the only way to do medicine. The ideas that God doesn't really exist. You might have a different bonding. You might have chosen a different way to see the world in your perspective. And now you've been given some ideas and given some different perceptions. Because now you've been changed. You're different. If you see this thing, you know it's Jesus. If you see this pattern, you know there's an Eskimo and an Indian. If you see this, you know it's an Eskimo and an Indian. You've been changed. You're different now. You also know that equality and equal economic education is going to help solve the problems of this world. You know that everybody in medicine has the right to choose natural or synthetic, and you know that now. You're bonded to that. And you also know that there is a spirit, and you have at least the choice to choose. And there's no way that 1% of the population should be taking away that right from you. And they should not be controlling all your decisions. So here in this idea of perception, I've tried to explore lots of different ways of looking at perception and bonding and consciousness. We should never let greed be so excessive that it risks destruction of the environment. Because that would mean the destruction of the body, the mind, the spirit. Greed has gotten to a point now of extreme development. I was watching the movie Dr. No the other day in 1960s. Sean Connery he was a skinny little guy. Very interesting. And Dr. No was asking for $1 million. And today it's funny because it would cost $1 million to build his fish tank. What we've seen now is we've seen a dramatic development in our culture where there is a dramatic building drift. The rich are getting richer and richer, richer, excessively, incredibly, undeniably, fantastically rich. There was just a couple of billionaires years ago. Now, in my life, I've seen this development. Whereas it was millionaires back in the time of James Bond's Dr. No. We talked about millionaires. Now there's billionaires. And then coming on the possibility of some trillionaires. It's incredible. And yet there are more and more poor people every year. We don't need to give these people money. That's not the answer. We don't want to give them fish. We want to teach them how to fish. We want to develop an education. And it should be an obligation of the incredibly disturbingly rich people to give more money to the education of the poor. That's basically what these people need, equal economic education, because then that would produce the harmony to bring us to that 1,000 years of peace and tranquility. That would bring us to stabilizing real estate values and a respect of the planet. We must build the respect of the environment into all of our world religions and all of our world dogma. We must recognize that all of this must go forward in order to get to that place, to reduce our prejudices. And we all need to start recognizing we are people of the world. We share air, we share a planet, we share a brotherhood. We are body, mind, spirit. We are all social. And when our socialness of the brain extends to include all the people of the planet, and when our respect for the planet grows and develops, this will stabilize the body, mind, and the spirit of all of us through the social environmental network. And we will get to that 1,000 years of peace and harmony. If we don't pull the trigger, if we don't let synthetic chemicals destroy this world, the possibilities of genetically modified foods, the possibilities of what the chemical companies could really do, the potential harm by judgmentalness, and the possibility of destroying this entire world. We must do something. That's what this is all about. Just wanted to step aside and talk about memory function a little bit. You see, memory is stored in an imprecise fashion, meaning not really like a computer. We have the idea that we store our memories in some type of computer fashion, that they can be retrieved like a videotape, etc. This is not the case. If you think about the last time you went ice skating, if you think about the last time you were skiing or something, and think about it in your mind, many people will remember it as if they see themselves on television. They will see themselves on television, and that's called octoscopic imagery. 60-80% of the population, depending on where you are, will be able to do this. You didn't actually experience the skiing that way. You experienced it from inside, not really watching yourself. But yet you store many memories in a different fashion. Now, the best analogy for this, the best way to really explain this, is that of when I did marital counseling as a licensed psychologist in America. People would come to me for marital counseling. And the husband would say, I remember last Friday night, and he would tell the entire story. I came in and I was so nice, and I asked, where's dinner? And the wife would tell this, I remember Friday night you came in, slammed your fist on the table and yelled and screamed. And real quickly, we're going to find that those two people will have experienced exactly the same event. Not only do they experience it in different ways, but they actually stored the memory in a different fashion. And now they retrieve the memory in a different fashion, because when you retrieve memory, it's just as well. You are clouding your retrieval of memory, your perception of memory, clouding it through your personality, your emotions. So emotionality takes a big place in this. We have the Michael Jackson case going on now, where, the young boy said that Michael Jackson handled his sex organ. And yet he says it almost felt like a dream. So now it's up to the jury to decide, and of course the jury hasn't been out yet. So it's close. But the jury has to decide, what is the truth? Is his dream quality meaning something? Just what that is that? Did it actually happen? Is it a memory? Is that memory enhanced by money? The idea of the fact he's going to get big money out of this. That's the other part of that case. Because we have to understand that when I talked to some of those tobacco people who had their hand on the Bible, they absolutely firmly believed what they were saying, even though it was completely obvious it was a lie. They were not intentionally lying. Something had happened inside to actually make them believe that. So when we get down to here in our ideas of perception, we're going to understand that our ways of storing memory really do not take place in a computerized fashion. Our perception of the universe and how we see the little electrons and protons, we're completely blinded from that. We're completely blinded from the actions of what's happening outside the cosmos, even events that happen in our own solar system. We are perceptually linked to a very small band of perceptual things that we are capable of seeing and feeling and touching and then reading. And as ideas pass through our society, we must realize that these things have an awful lot of social network, behavioral concepts, because certain things are rewarded, and behaviors that are rewarded we get more of, we start to see. If you're growing up and you're rewarded for being a bigot or for being prejudiced, if you're rewarded for that, your behavior in that area will increase. And these are the things that really happen that kind of shape who and what we are. But now we are faced with a big problem in the world. We are faced with a changing environment, a destructive environment. We're faced with the possibility of losing a planet because of what greed has done. We're faced with a big problem here. So we need to do something about that. But here in our analysis of perception, we must realize that it's more than just not trusting the eyes and the ears. There's a whole bunch of other things that we need to mistrust. And we need to really get back to an honest perception.
Look into my eyes, you will see what you mean to me. Baby, search your heart, baby, search your soul. When you find me there, your search no more. Don't tell me it's not worth trying for. You can't tell me it's not worth dying for. You know it's true. Everything I do it for you. Look into my heart, you will find there's nothing there to hide. Take me as I am, baby, take my life. I would give it all, I would sacrifice. Don't tell me it's not worth fighting for. I can't help it, there's nothing I want more. You know it's true, everything I do it for you. There's no love like your love, and no other could give more love. There's no other unless you're there all the time, all the way. Look into my heart, you will find there's nothing there to hide. Take me as I am, take my life. I would give it all, I would sacrifice. You can't tell me it's not worth trying for. I can't help it, there's nothing I want more. I would fight for you, I would lie for you, walk the wire for you. Yes, I'd die for you. Everything I do it for you. I do it for